Hey, welcome back. Simon Lees here again. Got another guitar lesson for you to try some new things on the guitar maybe. I'm going to talk about octaves today, and what an octave is, it's when you play two notes simultaneously with the same letter name. So at least in this context it is. If I'm going to play E on the A string, that's on the 7th fret. Now, if I wanted to play another E at the same time, my best bet would be to go up 2 frets and down 2 strings onto the G string, and I'd find another E there. And the one on the G string is said to be an octave higher than the one on the A string. It's basically, if you think of the major scale, do, re, mi, so do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do and do are an octave apart, or the distance between the two do's is an octave. Another way of looking at it, you could play, say if you, we'll use E again. If I go up 12 frets, so that's the 7th fret, so 7 plus 12 is 19, so we get to the 19th fret. That's an octave as well. But you wouldn't be able to play those two notes simultaneously, and that's what I want to talk about today. So, if you imagine, there's a famous Hendrix tune that sort of goes... That's the tune, but it doesn't sound like that when Hendrix plays it, because he's doing it using octaves, which means he's playing a low version of every high note that he's playing at the same time, and he's doing it like this. So you can hear the difference. It's the same tune, it's the same notes, but it's more full, you know, it's a bigger sound, which, I mean, Jimi Hendrix used to play a lot of the time in a 3-piece band, so he had to try and make everything sound bigger, or as big as possible, you know. So now one way of playing an octave would be to maybe use your plectrum to play the notes on the A string, and at the same time use one of your spare fingers on your right hand to pluck the thinner string, so you sort of do it. That's one way of doing it. My preferred way is to actually strum the strings. Now that takes a little bit more effort, because you have to try and use parts of your fingers to keep the other strings quiet. So when you strum, I'm not particularly aiming for the two strings that I'm playing, because obviously there's a string in between and I've got to try and keep that quiet. So you know, there's no way I can miss that if I'm going to hit the A string and the G string. So what I need to do with these on this hand is use, well, first thing I notice, my fingers are fairly flat. They're not curled round. You know, it's not as though I'm trying to play a chord, because if you curl your fingers round, then all the other strings, you know, it's a bit of a mess. You know, it's not the worst thing in the world as long as you're in a particular key, but it's, yeah, you tend to lose the tune. You sort of lose the melody of what you're playing. So to get your fingers flatter, press the string down using a slightly lower part of your fingertip. So instead of pressing the string down using the end of your finger, use a part of your finger that's a little bit lower down. That means that the end of your finger is going to stick up past the string you're on and touch the string above. That keeps it quiet. You know, you don't want it to press that string down, because otherwise you'll get a different note that you didn't want. But that's the idea. So you notice that finger it's got a very slight bend at the end. So I don't want it pressing the D string down. I don't want it bent inwards, because otherwise you'll sort of get. which is, I mean, it's an interesting sound, but it's not what I'm after. So I've got the slightest of outward bends on that finger, and it's just keeping the string in between quiet as well. So I've actually got two fingers helping to keep that string quiet. It's kind of making sure, belt and braces, as they say. But at the same time, because that finger isn't curled round, I'm using the tip of my finger to keep the fat E string quiet. So that finger is actually damping two strings. This finger's also damping two strings, because although it's pressing the G string down, I'm not pressing the B string down. So the B string, that's kept quiet as well, So the D string is being damped twice, if you like. So there's two fingers damping that. The tip of my first finger is keeping the fat E damped, and the underside or the pad of my third finger is keeping the B string quiet. Now that only leaves the thin E, and the thin E, I've actually got a couple of fingers, because this one that's doing the rude gesture is touching the thin E string, and also the bottom part of my first finger is touching it as well. So you can see perhaps a little bit better there the angle that my first finger at. So they're not standing up like this, and they're not completely flat. They're just sort of flat-ish, but just at a slight angle, so that I'm not actually pressing the strings down that I shouldn't be pressing down. They're just being dampened. It sounds like a faff. The idea is you train your left hand to get into that position, anytime you want. So you sort of get used to how it feels. Something else worth mentioning on this one, something I find it helps, is to get my thumb. You see where my thumb is? It's not hooked over. My wrist isn't up in the air like this. It's very rare. In fact, I can't think of any situations where you want your wrist up in the air like this. It's just at the top. The first joint of my thumb, if you like, is just sitting on the binding on the top of my neck, or just on the top of the fretboard there. My wrist is bent. Well, it's slightly bent downwards as opposed to being bent up in the air. It's not quite like that, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get my thumb around the top. So it's just all these things have to come together, So, and finally, I'd say my thumb is slightly pointing towards the guitar. It's certainly not pointing towards the tuners, because again, that would put my wrist in a bit of a strange position. So that's how I've got my hands set up. The other nice thing about having my thumb where it is, so that it's sort of just at the top of the neck pointing towards the guitar, it makes if I want to put a vibrato on those notes, it's quite easy to get a nice controlled vibrato. So another angle it might be worth seeing is that. So you can see where my first finger joins my hand, at that main knuckle on my hand, is sort of between 1 and 2 frets below where the tip of my finger is. So I'm not trying to get everything to sort of line up with the fret. My fingers are on a bit of an angle. This all helps, getting these little details right. Not just for this technique, it'll help for a lot of different sort of, especially bluesy techniques, things where you need a bit of strength. This hand position is quite universal, So there's a couple of variations on the octave pattern. When I say the octave pattern, I mean from the low note to the high note, you have to go up 2 frets and down 2 strings. It's the same if you're on these 2 strings. If you're on the fat E and the D, it's the same arrangement, So if I'm on 9 on the fat E, the D string will be on 11. So again, it's up 2 frets and down 2 strings. If you go down to the thinner strings, you have to spread out a little bit more because the B and the G string are a little bit closer together. They're actually 1 fret closer than all the other strings. So you have to compensate for that by moving the high note a fret higher than it is on the other octave patterns. So for this, say if I'm going from the D string to the B string, you have to go up 3 frets, but it's still down 2 strings. And then it's the same if you do it on where the low note's on the G string and the high note's on the thin E string. You have to go up 3 frets and then down 2 strings. That's the nice thing. If you get this hand position right, then you can be as crazy as you want with your strumming hand. You know, so I'm hitting every single string, but the only ones you can hear, apart from like a dampened thud, are the notes that I'm pressing down, you know. You know, it's like, for that, I mean, because that's in the key of E, so I've got open strings that I could use. I am kind of raising my fingers up, so you can see my thumb's kind of going down a little bit, and I'm arching my fingers so that the E strings and the B string are ringing out. That's what's happening there. But most of the time you probably wouldn't want that because that only works in particular keys. So. And so if you like the sound of that, check out my harmonics video. That's it. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.